India's S400 changed the geometry of Operation Sindoor by turning Pakistani airspace itself into a killing zone, with 5 Pakistani fighter jets and 1 AWACS-class aircraft confirmed shot down at long range, including a record kill at roughly 330 kilometers inside Pakistani territory. India bought this shield in open defiance of US CAATSA pressure, and is now moving to scale up S400 numbers and push for S500 talks, a combination that will compress the usable airspace for the Pakistan Air Force to the point where even operating near the Afghan border becomes a calculated risk instead of a routine sortie. S400 in Operation Sindoor. Air Chief Marshal Amarpreet Singh has publicly confirmed that during Operation Sindoor, India downed 6 Pakistani military aircraft, 5 fighters and 1 large AEW&C element platform, with the S-400 described as the decisive game-changer in the engagement. The large aircraft was hit at a distance of around 330 kilometers inside Pakistani territory, marking what Indian sources call the largest ever surface-to-air kill on record, and instantly degrading Pakistan's airborne command and control over the entire battle space. The S-400's long-range coverage kept most of Pakistan's combat fleet pushed back from the border, forcing them to fly lower, further, and shorter missions, while Indian strike packages and drones operated under a protective dome anchored by these batteries. Pakistani AWACS and element aircraft, which normally sit comfortably behind the front lines and manage fighter flows, suddenly became high-value targets sitting well inside the S-400 envelope. And once one of them was destroyed, the rest were forced to pull back, blinding the network that supports JF17, F-16, and J-10C operations. Long-range kill chain. The Indian Air Chief has underlined that these kills were not lucky shots, but the product of a deliberate, layered kill chain linking space-based surveillance, ground-based radar, and the S-400's multi-band sensors and missiles. Search and tracking radars detected the Pakistani packages deep in their own airspace. Target data was fused in real time, and long-range interceptors were launched against both the fighter escorts and their AWACS controller, breaking the entire offensive wave before it could reach weapon release points. The psychological effect was as important as the attrition. Once Pakistan's pilots realized that even rear area, or SAFE, orbits were inside a lethal Indian SAM envelope, PAF commanders had to curtail offensive sorties, tighten flight profiles, and accept higher abort rates, which translated directly into fewer effective strikes and more airframes preserved on the ground instead of contesting the air. Bought in defiance of U.S. pressure. India signed the S-400 deal with Russia in October 2018 for about $5 billion despite explicit U.S. warnings that the purchase could trigger CAATSA sanctions and jeopardize advanced U.S. origin platforms. Washington repeatedly signaled that India could face Turkey-style penalties, but New Delhi held the line, arguing that long-range air defense against Pakistan and China was a core sovereignty issue, and not something to be subcontracted to American political moods. Instead of backing down, India combined hard-nosed bargaining with lobbying inside the U.S. Congress, backing amendments that gave the American president waiver authority, and stressing that Indian cooperation on other fronts, from Indo-Pacific strategy to U.S. arms buys like Apache and P-8 is, justified an exception. The result was a de facto waiver environment in which deliveries began in 2021, and multiple S-400 regiments are now operational on the Pakistan and China fronts, integrated into India's wider air defense network that also includes Barak 8, Akash, and counter-drone grids. Scaling up S-400 numbers. After the performance in Operation Sindoor, India has moved from treating S-400 as a niche capability to building it into the backbone of a continental air shield. Reports indicate that New Delhi is activating a follow-on clause in the original 2018 contract to procure 5 additional S-400 systems, roughly doubling the planned inventory and expanding coverage over both western and northern sectors. The proposed structure envisages some new units delivered directly from Russia and others built in India under transfer of technology arrangements, tying the S400 program into the Atmanirbhar Bharat agenda and shortening logistical chains for spares and maintenance. With each regiment capable of covering hundreds of kilometers of airspace and engaging scores of targets simultaneously, 10 S400 systems give India enough depth to create overlapping kill zones from the Arabian Sea to central India and up to the LAC. S500, next ladder of escalation. Indian and Russian sources now flag that discussions on acquiring Russia's S500 Prompty system, designed for extended-range air and missile defense, are on the table for President Vladimir Putin's upcoming visit. Media and defense reports suggest that New Delhi will use the summit to push a broader package, including Su-57 fighters and an S-500-based strategic shield, moving beyond just tactical air defense into anti-ballistic and potentially limited anti-hypersonic roles. Some Indian officials and analysts caution that, formally, the immediate focus is on consolidating the S-400 fleet, but parallel briefings and leaks indicate that S-500 options, whether direct purchase or co-development for a future Indian variant, are now part of serious strategic planning after S-400's validation in combat. The logic is straightforward. If S-400 wrested control of the mid to long-range air domain over Pakistan, S-500 gives India the ability to push the engagement line even further out, into upper atmosphere and near-space trajectories. What S-500 does to Pakistan's airspace? The S-500 is conceived as a system capable of hitting aerodynamic targets at ranges beyond those of the S-400 and engaging certain classes of ballistic and hypersonic threats, with engagement altitudes extending far higher than traditional SAMs. If deployed along with a dense S-400 belt, India can stack layers of coverage so that Pakistani fighters, cruise missiles, and even some ballistic profiles can be engaged from the moment they climb, long before they approach the line of control or international border. For the Pakistan Air Force, already forced by S-400 to fly further back and lower, an operational S-500 network means losing even large chunks of what is currently considered rear-safe airspace. AWACS, Elant platforms and aerial tankers positioned near southern Punjab, Sindh, or even closer to the Afghan frontier become potential targets if they rise to altitudes that maximize radar horizon and communications reach, putting the very enablers of any serious air campaign at risk. Impact on JF17s, AWACS and Afghan-adjacent airspace. During Operation Sindoor, PAF depended on a mix of JF17s, F-16s and J-10CS supported by Saab 2000 and other AEW&C assets, but still lost 5 fighters and 1 AEW&C type aircraft according to the Indian Air Chief, a loss rate that is unsustainable for a force already juggling 2 fronts and tight budgets. With the S-400 active, Pakistani commanders had to constantly trade off between bringing AWACS forward for better coverage and risking a long-range SAM shot, or pulling them back and accepting blind spots over the front lines in mountain sectors. Layer an S-500 on top of this reality, and the map shrinks even further. Flight profiles that once felt immune, such as orbits in central or western Pakistan close to Afghan airspace, could now fall into a combined S-400-S-500 engagement basket, especially if India uses elevated radars, airborne sensors, and space-based ISR to extend detection lines. In practical terms, this means that PAF's ability to maintain persistent AWACS coverage near Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, or Afghan border corridors in a shooting war becomes doubtful, as every orbit becomes a potential one-way ticket if India chooses to engage. From contested skies to denial. Operation Sindoor confirmed that the days of rough parity in the air are over. India combined Rafale, Su-30, Mirage 2000, precision munitions, and S-400 to impose an asymmetric cost curve on Pakistan's air operations. Long-range SAMs hunted not just shooters but their controllers, while Indian strike aircraft enjoyed a shield that cut down Pakistan's interception opportunities, creating windows where PAF simply could not safely contest the ingress. With expanded S400 numbers and a future S500 layer, this moves from local dominance in specific windows to a standing posture of air denial over large swathes of Pakistani airspace in wartime. Pakistan can still launch individual salvos, low-level penetrations, and cruise missile attacks, but each wave faces overlapping radar coverage, multiple interceptor types, and the risk that its scarce AWACS, tankers, and high-end fighters will be picked off from distances they cannot answer. How this shapes the next war. India's S400 purchase, made in the face of US sanctions threats, has already paid off once in a real conflict by delivering confirmed kills and strategic leverage in Operation Sindoor. The decision to scale up S400 numbers and actively explore S500 options is not symbolism. It is a cold assessment that long-range air and missile defense has become the central pillar for managing simultaneous Pakistan and China contingencies while keeping escalation under control. For Pakistan, the message from May 2025 is blunt. Every future war will start with its air force and support aircraft already on the defensive, fighting inside a shrinking box of survivable airspace. As India thickens S400 coverage and adds S500, the cost of flying anywhere near the Indo-Pak or even Afghan-adjacent corridors in wartime goes up sharply, and the gap between paper order of battle and usable combat power will only widen further in India's favor.